Well, good morning and welcome to Palm Sunday. We are sure going to miss the children coming down the aisle waving their palm branches. So, this is the best that we can do. But let's rejoice. It is Palm Sunday. Last month I spoke to you about Vladimir, who we as a church support. We support his work mentoring church leaders in Eurasia. He lives in the USA, and this week all of his family came down with COVID. But we thank the Lord that it was a relatively mild dose, and they're on the mend. But please continue to pray for them. Today I want to share another organization that we support, IBEX, led by Craig Shugart. They loan serious money to ongoing businesses in difficult areas of the world. And these businesses live out kingdom values. And I love this organization. I'm involved in it in a very small way myself. But I was encouraged by the following story from a company that IBEX loans money to. Now, in certain of these difficult countries, most companies, they actually keep two sets of books, two sets of financial books. One is the reality, the authentic books, and the other has been doctored for the government inspectors, so they pay less taxes. Taxes in these countries can be horrendous. When a tax auditor comes, specifically in this country, with this company, they know what's going on. So they examine the books provided to them, they pull it apart, they find errors, and then they fine them. And they even negotiate that fine with the tax auditor. And he takes a cut on what he collects. And that's how the system works. That's how he makes his living. It's no different, actually, than in Jesus' day. And this company that IBEX has loaned money to actually only keeps one set of books, the authentic books. And when the auditor came, he couldn't find a single mistake in which to pull them up and find them. And he was very frustrated about it. And he went over the books again, he couldn't find anything. So he went back to his boss, who also gets a cut of what they collect, and she didn't believe him. So she went herself to audit, and to her amazement, she couldn't find anything either. So she pressed the owners on why. And they were able to explain to her how the way of Jesus shapes their lives and their business. And she was so amazed that she came to faith herself. The story reminds us that there are two ways to live. One is to play along with the systems of the powers that are in place, be corrupt because the system is corrupt, or choose to opt out of that game, which could be very costly, and let Jesus lead the way. It's costly, perhaps in lost revenue, for sure, but even more so in that in not joining the system, it exposes the system for what it is. It challenges it. And it can result in being ostracized, being judged, and in some circumstances, even violence. But think about it. If this company won't cheat the government, how do you think it treats its clients? There's an attractiveness to authenticity. And hopefully, with Jesus' help, things improve in the long run. Every day, we have to choose which system will we live by. As we celebrate Palm Sunday, Jesus brings this choice into focus. How do you receive the King that rides on a donkey? Palm Sunday is a day of celebration, a day when Jesus allows the crowds to honor and worship him as he rides on a donkey into the city of Jerusalem. It's been building for 3 years, when he began his ministry at the River Jordan. He has walked a tight rope of doing things that only God can do and not letting things get out of hand by exciting the crowd to crown him king. So often he says to those he's healed, don't tell anyone. We see him slipping through crowds when they get overly excited. But now is the moment. No more shushing, no more hiding his identity. This is full out declaration and disclosure. Jesus is the Messiah. It's the festival of Passover, and there will be no other Passover like it. The joy will turn to sorrow because Jesus is the Passover lamb. He arrives on a Sunday, hailed as King and Messiah. On Friday, he is crucified, despised, and rejected. The Jewish nation is pregnant with the anticipation of a Messiah coming to save them from their Roman oppressors. Many false ones have come and gone, and Jesus bursts onto the scene after his baptism, and he is nothing like their expectations of a conquering warrior king. Jesus has inaugurated what he declares to be the kingdom of God, and it's a kingdom like no other. It runs counter-cultural to other kingdoms. It's a kingdom empowered by God, but not in a way we think of power. Jesus is Son of God. The Gospel of Mark declares that in the first verse. The very essence, the very presence of God. And he has all authority as we see him casting out demons and calming the sea. But this authority is not exercised to oppress or be revengeful. He says he has not come to condemn the world, but to save it, to show it that there is a new way to live that is centered not in power, but actually by losing power. It's a kingdom of peace, of forgiveness, of servanthood. And Jesus lives it out and does things that only God can do, as we have seen over the past few weeks in this series of Mark. And in so doing, he exposes the oppression, the shame, the injustice, and the ugliness of life carved out by self-serving powers. You have the might of Rome and of King Herod ruling by fear and exploitation. You have the oppression of the religious system, which in the Jewish case have taken God's law and turned them into a millstone around the people's neck to benefit the powerful. You have demonic oppression that causes so much suffering. And Jesus confronts them all from a center of love, and in so doing turns the world upside down. And the people love it. It is beautiful to watch and experience. The powerful, they fear it. It exposes them for what they are. Something has to be done from their perspective. It's a steep descent down from the Mount of Olives into the Kidron Valley, and then you ascend up again, up to the city wall. Jesus has forewarned his disciples of what is going to happen. We read in Isaiah 50, one of the prophetic passages about the Passion. In verse 7 it says, "Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. Therefore I have set my face like flint, and I know I will not be put to shame." The word flint is used in most of the translations. It depicts such hardness, such steadfast determination. Nothing will stop Jesus from completing the task set before him. So Palm Sunday, this open public display of Jesus as Messiah, sets in motion, it accelerates the need for the authorities to get rid of him. Jesus knows and is determined to see this through. Palm Sunday, it's quite a scene. It's found in all four Gospels. Matthew says the whole city was stirred. Jesus comes from the Mount of Olives. There's a crowd with him already. John's Gospel speaks of the excitement of the people because Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead. And you actually wonder, is Lazarus in the crowd? People come out from the city to greet him. It's the Passover festival. Jerusalem is packed with visitors from all over the Roman Empire. Some Pharisees come out as well, disgusted by the crowd's outpouring of honor and worship, saying the whole world has gone after him. The crowd wave palm branches. It's a symbol of triumph and joy. They lay cloaks on his pathway, a sign of prostration to honor him as king. Jesus says in Matthew's account that if the crowds do not shout, the stones will. All of creation is on alert. Something big is happening. And it was prophesied some 500 years beforehand by Zechariah. We read that in Zechariah 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly, and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The donkey is an important part of this story. And once more, Jesus is turning things upside down. The donkey is a valuable animal. In Exodus, you don't steal another man's donkey. I think Job had 500 donkeys. They were symbols of service, of suffering, of peace, and of humility. Solomon actually rode on a mule to his inauguration, a sign of peace. Culturally, kings come on a horse, a symbol of power and war. Caesar would never ride a donkey. Jesus comes in peace, without bloodshed. Not the warrior king the Jews were hoping for as their Messiah. He comes as the King of peace. Their cries of Hosanna means save us. Their hopes are very nationalistic. Their jubilation is all about Israel. However, when Israel only thinks of Israel, it is actually not the true Israel that God formed and intended to be a blessing to all nations. Being Israel is giving one's life away for the Gentiles. And so Jesus is coming into this triumphant procession. He is actually the true Israel, because he knows that in going to Jerusalem, he will be put to death, and he will rise after 3 days, not just for Israel, but for the whole world. Now you would think that this procession would end with a huge gathering at the temple, perhaps with a rousing speech by Jesus himself, followed by a fireworks display, an inauguration fitting the moment and the man. But it doesn't happen that way. Mark's account particularly turns the event into an anticlimax. I never really thought about this before, but let's read verse 11 of Mark 11. Jesus entered Jerusalem. He went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. That's kind of weird. Now, I'm going to have to use my imagination here, but I imagine that Jesus has entered through the gate. It's probably the eastern gate, nearest to the temple, closest to the Mount of Olives. He dismounts the donkey, and then he climbs stairs into the temple courts. But the crowds don't seem to have followed him. The temple day was over. the courtyard booths were closed. Most people would have left the temple. You just get this feeling from Mark, when Mark says he looked around, that it was a personal moment with little or no crowd. It's a strange scene. He's now in the temple area, the epicenter of the Jewish world, and the celebration has stopped. It's as if he has not been welcomed into his Father's house. And I wonder if this is another moment, a foreshadowing moment of rejection. He takes it in, and then he leaves. He comes as the peacemaker king, but perhaps he leaves under the weight of knowing Israel will reject him. Perhaps I'm reading too much into this, but I do think there's much more going on than the people or we realize. But it is a scene of welcoming him as king or rejecting him as a fraud. The question for the people that day is the same for our day, the same for you and for me. So we come to the scriptures, to these stories with open hands and minds, because there is always more to the story, and we are usually in the story somewhere. So Lord, help us, reveal and teach us new things in familiar stories to make us healthier followers of you. So this scene begs the question, who will you follow? Will you embrace this new kingdom and Messiah, a new way to live, or will you reject and put up with or even buy into the existing powers we know? The thing is, there's no middle ground with Jesus. C.S. Lewis famously said, "A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with the man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice." This Passion Week, which begins with this celebratory scene, does not take long to turn into rejection. And people reject Jesus for different reasons. We see this throughout the gospel. The elite saw him as a threat to their power and rejected him. Some would have rejected him because he didn't measure up to what their perception of what the Messiah should be. Some rejected him due to peer pressure. Others rejected him because he interfered with their life. He was asking too much. The thing is, figuratively, Jesus is still riding this donkey, and he's riding towards you. He's still the peacemaker. The question for you, is he the poached egg, the lunatic, the devil, or the Son of God? Jesus will have it no other way. Will we embrace or reject him? And we're all at some point confronted with this Jesus. And then as followers of Jesus, he comes to us every day with that challenge to embrace him and live out the kingdom values centered not in power as we know it, but actually giving power away. For me, it's like the movie Groundhog Day. Jesus comes every day and we choose how to live. Most days I look in the mirror and I shave. If I don't shave, I look pretty disheveled. I can't get that macho look, with the younger generation. That unshaven sort of 4 or 5 day kind of shadow. I need to look in the mirror and shave every day. Have you ever looked into the mirror and asked, who are you? I mean really looked and talked to that person. Get past the physical. Now, I also understand the Enneagram system is very popular to explore and understand one's personality. My wife tells me that I am an 8 or a 3, which means I'm not easy. Diana says that when we go to a restaurant and the waitress brings the food, I focus on the food because I'm goal-oriented, while she focuses on the server because she's relational. She wants to talk to the server. I want to eat a hot meal. That's what I am there for. But looking in a mirror, I'm talking about looking past the physical and looking past the personality and look into the soul. Look long enough and hard enough to see the cracks, to see the selfishness, the idols of the heart, the hurts, the pain, the shame, all the injustices we have caused to others, the secrets we would be embarrassed to have exposed. Jesus comes on a donkey and he says, despite what you see in that mirror, what you feel, learn of me, he says, follow me. You are special because you are made in my image and I love you. Pastor Ross has quoted this verse a number of times, Matthew 11:28-30. We really like what it says in the Message. Are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? Could be something else you're burned out on. Are you stressed out? Jesus says, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. As we reflect on this Passion Week, may we go deeper into the cross and the resurrection. Pray for fresh understanding. Pray for the courage to follow Jesus and learn what it means to lay down the power so that we might serve others. Amen.